What if a building could grow from the earth like a crystal? Its form dictated not by human hands but by the slow, patient forces of nature itself. Imagine standing before a structure that seems to bloom from the desert sand, its fragmented geometry echoing millennia of geological transformation, where over 500 interlocking disks of varying sizes thrust outward in chaotic yet deliberate angles, creating a silhouette that defies every convention of orthogonal architecture. This is the National Museum of Qatar in Doha, a 52,000 square meter monument to cultural memory designed by French architect Jean Nouvel and completed in 2019, and it represents one of the most audacious attempts in contemporary architecture to translate a natural phenomenon into built form, to capture the essence of a nation's identity through the reinterpretation of a humble mineral formation found beneath the desert surface. The desert rose, a crystalline structure formed when minerals crystallize in arid sabkha plains through evaporation over thousands of years, becomes here not merely a metaphor but the literal organizational principle of an entire museum. Its blade-like petals of sand and salt transformed into colossal concrete and steel discs that cantilever up to 14 meters into space, creating interstitial voids and shadowed courtyards that fragment sunlight and frame the relentless blue sky of the Arabian Gulf. To understand this building is to understand Qatar itself, a nation undergoing one of the most rapid cultural and economic transformations in modern history, a place where Bedouin heritage intersects with global ambition, where the memory of pearl diving and nomadic life must coexist with the glass towers of West Bay and the infrastructures of a 21st-century petrostate. The museum sits on the Doha Corniche, occupying a site that once held the palace of Sheikh Abdullah bin Jassim Al Thani, the son of the founder of modern Qatar, and this historic structure has been carefully preserved and integrated into Nouvel's new design, creating a dialogue between past and present, between the modest scale of traditional Gulf architecture and the monumental ambition of contemporary cultural infrastructure. Qatar's leadership, particularly Sheikha Al Mayasa bint Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, has pursued an aggressive cultural policy aimed at positioning the nation as a regional hub for art, education, and heritage, commissioning star architects like I.M. Pei for the Museum of Islamic Art, Rem Koolhaas for the Qatar National Library, and Jean Nouvel for this project, which would become the centerpiece of Qatar's museological landscape and a symbol of national identity ahead of the 2022 FIFA World Cup. Jean Nouvel was selected not only for his international stature but for his consistent interest in contextualism, his ability to draw from local materials, climates, and cultural narratives without resorting to pastiche or superficial ornamentation, as seen in his Institut du Monde Arabe in Paris with its mechanical aperture facade inspired by Mashrabiyah screens, or his Torre Agbar in Barcelona that evokes the mountains of Montserrat and the ephemeral qualities of water. For Qatar, Nouvel sought an architectural language that was unmistakably rooted in the desert, in the geological and cultural substrates of the Arabian Peninsula, and he found it in the desert rose, a formation so ubiquitous in the region that it becomes almost invisible, yet so structurally and visually complex that it offers infinite possibilities for architectural translation. The design process began with exhaustive research into the morphology of actual desert roses, studying their interlocking crystal blades, the way light refracts through translucent mineral layers, the randomness within an underlying geometric order, and Nouvel's team used digital modeling to extrapolate these principles into an architectural system where each disc would be unique in size, angle, and relationship to its neighbors, creating a building that appears to have no front or back, no dominant axis, but rather a continuous surface of overlapping planes that shift and reconfigure as one moves around the perimeter. The museum's program is distributed across these interlocking volumes, with galleries, administrative spaces, conservation labs, auditoriums, and public circulation woven through the complex in a nonlinear sequence that mirrors the museum's narrative structure, which tells the story of Qatar from its geological origins through its human settlement, pearl diving economy, oil discovery, and rapid modernization, a journey that unfolds not as a straightforward chronology, but as a constellation of memories, artifacts, and immersive environments. The discs themselves range from intimate scales barely larger than a human to monumental overhangs that create vast shaded plazas, and their surfaces are clad in a fiber-reinforced concrete embedded with sand from the Qatari desert, giving the entire structure a warm ochre tonality that shifts with the sun's movement, at dawn appearing almost pink, at midday bleaching to near white, and at dusk glowing with amber and rust. The use of local sand is not merely aesthetic but symbolic, a literal embedding of the land into the building's skin, though achieving the structural and visual consistency required for such a facade demanded extensive material testing, as the sand's composition varies and its integration into concrete affects both color and performance. The engineering of the National Museum of Qatar was led by UrbArchitect and partners, who faced the monumental challenge of translating Nouvel's vision into a structurally viable system, and the solution involved a complex hybrid structure where each disc is essentially a concrete shell supported by internal steel frames, with cantilevers achieved through post-tension concrete and concealed steel trusses that transfer loads back to a network of columns hidden within the thicker portions of the discs, creating the illusion that these massive forms float effortlessly despite weighing hundreds of tons each. The largest discs cantilever up to 14 meters, requiring sophisticated finite element analysis to ensure stability under dead loads, live loads, wind pressures, and the thermal expansion inherent in Qatar's extreme climate, where summer temperatures regularly exceed 45 degrees Celsius and the differential between sun-exposed and shaded surfaces can create significant structural stresses. The facade system itself is composed of glass fiber reinforced concrete panels, each custom fabricated and numbered, with over 76,000 individual panels required to clad the building's 539 discs, and the fabrication process involved creating molds for each unique geometry, casting the panels with integrated sand aggregate, and then transporting them to site for installation in a precise sequence that required digital coordination and on-site laser surveying to ensure millimeter-level accuracy. The intersections between discs create a secondary architecture of voids and apertures, some left open to create dramatic courtyards where date palms rise through circular openings, others glazed with floor-to-ceiling panels that bring natural light deep into the interior galleries, and these glazed zones are fitted with high-performance low-E coatings and shading devices to mitigate solar heat gain while maintaining visual transparency. The building's relationship with Qatar's harsh climate is central to its design, and Nouvel employs the discs not only as sculptural elements but as environmental moderators, their overlapping configuration creating multiple layers of shade that reduce direct solar exposure on vertical glazing and outdoor spaces, a passive strategy that recalls the courtyards and wind towers of traditional Gulf architecture, but executed at a scale and complexity made possible only by contemporary computational design and construction technologies. The museum's mechanical systems are integrated into the structure's mass, with HVAC distribution running through the hollow cores of the larger discs and air handling units concealed in service zones, while the vast interior galleries benefit from the thermal mass of the concrete shells, which absorb and release heat gradually, reducing peak cooling loads and allowing for more efficient climate control in a region where air conditioning typically accounts for the majority of a building's energy consumption. The exterior plazas and courtyards feature misting systems and evaporative cooling strategies that create microclimates where visitors can experience outdoor space even during the summer months, though the building's primary environmental strategy is simply to create as much shade as possible, turning the museum's envelope into a continuous canopy that filters and diffuses the desert sun. The construction of the museum took nearly a decade, with work beginning in 2010 and the building finally opening to the public in March 2019. And the extended timeline reflects both the technical complexity of the project and the iterative process of refining details, from the exact composition of the fiber-reinforced concrete to the coordination of MEP systems within the constrained geometries of the discs to the integration of the historic palace, which sits at the heart of the new museum, and has been meticulously restored to serve as both an artifact within the collection and a functional space for VIP receptions and special exhibitions. The interior experience of the museum is defined by a sequence of galleries that alternate between intimate, enclosed spaces within the discs and vast open halls where multiple discs intersect to create soaring volumes, and Nouvel collaborated closely with exhibition designers to ensure that the architecture and the narrative content work in concert, with some galleries designed as dark, immersive environments where projections and sound installations dominate, others as brightly lit display halls for artifacts ranging from ancient manuscripts to contemporary art, and still others as transitional spaces where the architecture itself becomes the primary exhibit, with carefully framed views outward to the desert landscape or inward to the restored palace. The museum's collection includes over 8,000 objects spanning Qatar's history, from archaeological finds dating back millennia to the personal effects of the ruling Al Thani family, And the exhibition design employs a mix of traditional vitrines, multimedia installations, and full-scale recreations of historical environments, including a reconstructed Bedouin tent, a pearl diving dhow suspended in space, and a massive projected timeline that wraps around a curved gallery wall. The cultural impact of the National Museum of Qatar extends far beyond its function as a repository of artifacts. It represents a deliberate effort to construct a national narrative, to define Qatari identity in an era of globalization and rapid change, and to assert cultural legitimacy on the world stage. For a nation that gained independence only in 1971 and whose population is overwhelmingly expatriate, with Qatari citizens representing less than 15% of residents, the question of identity is particularly urgent, and the museum offers a carefully curated answer that emphasizes continuity with the past even as it celebrates the present, that honors Bedouin traditions while acknowledging the cosmopolitan realities of contemporary Doha. The building's form, so radically different from the glass and steel typologies of the city's financial district or the pastiche neo-Islamic aesthetics of some heritage projects, stakes out a middle ground, asserting that Qatar can be both modern and rooted, both globally engaged and distinctly local. The desert rose becomes a kind of national emblem, a form that is universally recognizable yet uniquely tied to this place, and Nouvel's translation of it into architecture performs a kind of cultural alchemy, elevating a humble geological curiosity into a monument of international significance. The museum has drawn comparisons to other projects that seek to define national or regional identity through bold architectural gestures, from Jornutson's Sydney Opera House to Oscar Niemeyer's Brasilia. And like those precedents, the National Museum of Qatar will be judged not only on its architectural merits, but on its ability to resonate with the community it represents and to endure as a symbol beyond the immediate context of its creation. Early reception has been mixed, with critics praising the building's formal audacity and material richness while questioning whether its complexity serves or overwhelms its programmatic function. And some have noted that the labyrinthine circulation can be disorienting, that the dominance of the architecture can compete with rather than support the exhibitions, and that the building's maintenance requirements, given the sheer number of custom elements and the harsh environmental conditions, may prove challenging over time. Yet these critiques are perhaps inevitable for any project of such ambition, and they reflect a tension inherent in all monument making between the desire for iconic form and the pragmatic demands of institutional function. What remains undeniable is that Jean Nouvel has created a building unlike any other, one that pushes the boundaries of what is technically and formally possible, while remaining deeply connected to its cultural and geographical context. The National Museum of Qatar embodies Nouvel's career-long exploration of what he calls specific architecture, the idea that every project must respond uniquely to its site, its program, and its cultural moment, resisting the homogenizing forces of global architectural practice in favor of designs that could exist nowhere else. In this sense, the museum is not just a building but an argument, a demonstration that contemporary architecture can engage with tradition without resorting to nostalgia, that it can employ cutting-edge technology in service of culturally specific narratives, and that the lessons of nature, when carefully studied and thoughtfully translated, can yield forms of surprising beauty and power. The desert rose, formed over millennia by the patient work of water, salt, and sand, becomes in Nouvel's hands a metaphor for architecture itself, a process of accretion and crystallization, of order emerging from apparent chaos, of permanent form arising from transient forces. And perhaps that is the ultimate achievement of the National Museum of Qatar. Not just that it tells the story of a nation, but that it does so in a language that is simultaneously ancient and utterly contemporary, grounded in the earth yet reaching toward the future, a building that grows from the desert like a crystal and offers to all who encounter it a glimpse of how architecture can still surprise us, still move us, still make us see the world anew. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.